be who you really are.
Yeah.
The argument to me is like, has Twitter failed as the judge? And I would say yes, you failed. Did you read about this Babylon Bee? Do you know what the Babylon Bee is?
So there's some clips going around showing Bill Maher ripping into Twitter and defending the Babylon Bee. He had a really interesting discussion, had a couple of guests on to talk about the question, is Twitter the new town square? Of course, that's what Musk says. Musk says it's the de facto town square. So Maher has some guests on to talk about that, First Amendment issues, free speech, whether we should be able to have jokes on these platforms. In the course of that discussion, he brings up the Babylon Bee, pretends he doesn't know what it is, but he does bring it up and defend us. It's really interesting. There's a few things I want to go through in that conversation, so I'm going to play some clips and then respond.
Let's talk about Twitter and free speech, shall we? And Elon Musk, you know, we're all in the media of some way. The CEO of Twitter, well, maybe not any longer, but he was. He said, our role is not to be bound by the First Amendment. Now, let's just start with, it is a private company. They can do whatever they want.
Right.
Let's get past that.
Yep.
That's a dodge answer. Yeah, what Musk is saying is, but it is de facto the town square, and some sheriff should come in and say, what good is the First Amendment if we're the place where people are really talking, they can't talk?
Bill Maher nails it here. He gets it. He understands what the issue is. So often when you bring up this topic of free speech rights on the internet, people will remind you these are privately owned companies that can do whatever they want, but that misses the point. It totally misses the point. The point is that this is where viewpoints are exchanged. This is where debates are hosted. This is where people can speak and be heard. And for that reason, this is the public square. It's what Musk called the de facto town square. If you can be arbitrarily restricted from the town square because you spread misinformation or told a joke that the powers that be don't like, then we have a speech problem on our hands and we need to do something about it. Either the law needs to catch up to the fact that the public square is now hosted and managed by privately owned companies and rights need to be restored there or protected there, or somebody needs to come in and change things up. In this case, Musk can come in and restore free speech to the place where people actually speak and are heard. As it stands right now, if you're a conservative, you can't speak freely on these platforms. You have to go somewhere where people aren't actually listening to speak your mind, and that is a big speech problem. So Maher gets it. I think he frames it perfectly here. Let's see how his guests respond.
You think that's a valid argument?
Doug knows more about the legality of it. He's right. And I think everybody needs to get over the fact that the First Amendment does not apply to Twitter. This is not government censorship of anything.
This is not government censorship of anything. I mean, it could be. The government can't outsource censorship to a privately owned third party. You can't have a privately owned company do that which would be unconstitutional for the government to do itself. The Supreme Court's ruled on that before. So, I mean, if the government is working through these third parties to pick out targets to censor, if they're colluding with them on that, if they're threatening them with penalties if they don't censor misinformation that the government wants censored, then an argument can be made that these are state actors. They're not just privately owned entities, and then it is a First Amendment issue.
I think what we do have to worry about, what Elon Musk, who's a really great thinker and is really moving the needle on some important things in life about electric cars and about going to Mars, I think what he needs to think about is our democracy, which is struggling at the moment, relies upon an informed electorate. And that's always been a problem for us historically, but social media is not helping us become a more informed electorate. So there's a responsibility even by a private company or private actors to say, am I making a bad situation worse? And how do I get you that town square that is so valuable without wrecking society? And I think Twitter could have a serious conversation with itself about that, as can Facebook.
Social media is not helping us become a more informed electorate. He's concerned. He's concerned about misinformation. We have too much access to misinformation, and it's wrecking society, and Twitter needs to do something about that. What he is getting at, and what he's not saying explicitly, you know, he's trying to be careful about what he says here, but what he's getting at is that Musk is approaching the problem in exactly the wrong way. Musk is calling for the platforms to be more open and have less content moderation, more speech, and he's saying we need less. You need less information to be better informed.
I'm all for the First Amendment. Everybody, all Democrats are for the First Amendment, for goodness sakes. But Russian bots do not have a First Amendment privilege in this country or on Twitter, period, in the discussion. And that's the biggest problem.
Sure, buddy. you're all for the First Amendment. If you say you're all for the First Amendment, but you follow that with a but, then you are not all for the First Amendment. It means you have exceptions in mind that you're about to list. Now, the example he comes up with is just stupid here. Russian bots. Russian bots are not the issue. No one's bringing up the problem of Russian bots. I mean, obviously, we need bots removed from the platform because they're annoying. But the main issue here is that you've got half the country, literally half the country, is unable to share their views freely on these platforms because they have the risk of getting banned. Their opinions are considered hate speech. Their opinions are considered misinformation. When they tell jokes that the other side doesn't like, they get marked for insensitive content or for hate speech or misinformation, and they get threatened with being deplatformed. That's the problem here. So if you're supporting all of that stuff and you're trying to crack down on opinions you don't like by calling them misinformation, then you're not all for the First Amendment.
I think we can all agree on that.
Not us arguing on Twitter.
Let's just at least be who you really are.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
But that's not really where the argument is. The argument to me is like, has Twitter failed in setting themselves up in the past as the judge of what can go out there? And I would say yes, you have. You failed when you threw the New York Post off of Twitter for talking about Hunter Biden's emails, and it turned out that was a real story.
Right.
You failed when you said we couldn't read about whether COVID had come from a lab. You failed.
So good. So good. They failed. They failed. They failed. This is what the left doesn't get. Bill Maher gets it, but most people on the left don't get this. When you're trying to stop misinformation, your bias can lead you to suppress stories that you don't like. And that's what Twitter has done over and over and over again. Real stories, true stories, have been suppressed as misinformation. They've gotten it wrong. They've totally disqualified themselves from being the ones who should be in charge of deciding what can be said and who can speak. They've disqualified themselves by getting it wrong over and over and over again. And so the answer is not more content moderation by the people who keep getting it wrong.
Did you read about this Babylon Bee? Do you know what the Babylon Bee is? I didn't know this.
No.
It's like the Christian version of the Onion.
Because everyone needs that.
Well, some people do.
I thought that was
They're not
Fox
all
News.
you and me, okay? It says your trusted source for Christian news and satire. I didn't know there's such a thing as Christian satire. I thought the religion itself was satire. That's me. I'm not everybody, okay? I'm not everybody.
This is the highlight of the entire segment for a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, he mentions the Babylon Bee. It's nice to get a shout out on Bill Maher's show, but I mean, he's mocking us, which is funny. It's a great joke. You know, I thought the religion itself was satire. That's funny. By the way, nobody should be exempt from mockery. I mean, if free speech means anything, it means nobody should be exempt from mockery. So that I love that he started this out by mocking us. That's funny. But then when they say Christian satire, who needs that? Maher says, well, some people do. I mean, not everybody is us. I love the humility here that's willing to say, look, there's people who have different views than us. They see the world differently. Let them have their thing. Let them be able to think the way that they want to think and make the jokes that they want to make and see the world from their own perspective. This idea, well, who needs Christian satire? Well, I mean, Christians? Is that a small population?
So listen to this. They got flagged they posted a funny video. This is funny to them. Okay. Sensitive content, Twitter said. In the video, they were making fun of Twitter for being too sensitive. This is so through the looking glass. Here's what happens in the video. This woman who, going into the Twitter building, this is, parody. This is what people do on television and have done forever. Okay. She's complaining to HR about how sensitive Twitter is. And the guy shows her an ink blot, and she keeps seeing Hitler in all the ink blots. Okay, then she runs screaming out of the building because this is right. Well within what satire has always been. And the fact that they flagged this for being insensitive shows their complete lack of self-awareness about what their own problem is. If that's where the line is, you have failed, Twitter. You do need a new show.
It is funny that Twitter marked as sensitive a video that made fun of them for being too sensitive. That's pretty funny. But Bill seems to be completely unaware of the fact that we're actually locked out of Twitter for doing a satirical joke about how Rachel Levine was named as our Man of the Year. I mean, we got locked out, and now they're requiring us to delete this tweet and admit that we engaged in hateful conduct. or we can't get back on the platform. We can't use our Twitter account. We've been locked out for over a month. He doesn't even seem to be aware of that. I think that's a lot more egregious than this silly Twitter joke that got labeled as sensitive content.
The fact of the matter is, insensitivity is one thing. Flat out misinformation, disinformation, flat out lies, not fake news. Fake news is a lie. Let's put it out there. Fake news is nothing but a lie. And things that incite violence, things that like that. I think there is a responsibility.
Right. Well, that's in the First Amendment. You can't.
Right.
You can't incite violence, and we're all
right.
No one's arguing.
So there's still.
He's all for the First Amendment, folks. He's all for it. But misinformation, that crosses a line. That's just like incitement to violence. I can feel Bill Maher's frustration listening to this guy. I mean, he's like, look, incitement to violence isn't covered by the First Amendment. I mean, that's unlawful speech. We're talking about lawful speech. What Musk wants to do, this is not a situation where anybody's calling for anything goes, where you can even say illegal things on these platforms. The point is, people need to be able to give their opinions. And we can't have Twitter trying to decide which opinions constitute hate speech and misinformation because they get it wrong repeatedly. And Bill Maher's guests are not getting that.
I think the issue is no one else is going to regulate them because we've learned that we're not anywhere close to being able to understand this and regulate social media. So could these companies take some responsibility and say, imagine if we were really that town square. Imagine if we were this place where people with differing opinions could have robust discussions. And there's a way they can get there. It's not what Elon Musk is currently looking at, and that worries me a little bit. But boy, if he could do that, if we can create that real town square, what would it do for us? You do it. You try and do it on your show, right? You battle people with different opinions with respect and respect their pluralism.
Right.
That's what that space would do for democracy.
Exactly.
This is an incoherent mess. I don't know what he's saying. He's saying these companies need to take some responsibility and imagine that they were the town square and then they could actually become the town square where real debate happens. He wants them to take more responsibility. I guess what he means by that is he wants more content moderation because that's going to be healthier for society. But I don't understand how we get closer to them being the actual town square by moderating more and limiting speech more. He has a problem with Musk's solution, but his solution is to make it less of a town square and more of a platform where speech is restricted. Musk just wants to open it up and make it the actual town square, which it really is. This is where debate happens. This is where public discourse happens. So this isn't even coherent what this guy is saying. But, you know, the conversation overall was interesting because at least you had Bill Maher coming to the defense of free speech and coming to the defense of the Babylon Bee. He mocked us before he defended us, which I think is great. Nobody should be exempt from mockery. That's what free speech is all about. His guests, these people on the left, just don't get it. They don't understand Twitter's failures. They don't understand the points that Maher is trying to make. They don't understand the argument as it's been properly framed, that we have a speech problem in this country where these platforms, well privately owned, are hosting the public discourse, and there are people who are being arbitrarily banned from it. And so there needs to be a solution one way or the other. Musk coming in and making it a free speech platform and respecting the right of people to disagree with each other openly on these platforms could be a great thing. It could be a great thing, and it would actually be good when it comes to the goal that these people are talking about, a more informed electorate, right? That happens when there's open debate and discussion, not when there's heavy-handed censorship.
Are you a purveyor of fine goods and a patron of quality entertainment? If so, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment to support the fine institution known as the Babylon Bear. And if you don't subscribe, you must be one of those unfortunates who can't even afford an in-house sommelier. Speaking of which, Reginald, bring the 1906 Solemn Qu'est-ce que tu cherches?